All right, ready? All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's 26th of August, 2021. Stream the meeting live. Visit the City of Columbus YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/City of Columbus. Next business meeting is Thursday, September 9th, 2021, 12 p.m. Is that correct?
Thursday, September 1.
Thursday, September 9th at noon.
As needed. So
I see.
Okay.
So most likely it won't be.
Oh, business meeting. Okay. Sorry. Next hearing, Thursday, September 23rd at 4 o'clock right here. I'd like to first start by swearing in staff. All staff, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
You. Roll call.
Yes.
Commissioner Reed.
Present.
Let's see, Kelly's not here. Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Grado.
Here.
And I am here. City of Columbus, effective Monday, August 16th, all City of Columbus employees, visitors to the city building are required to wear face mask coverings regardless of vaccination status. Persons wishing to address the commission on matters not posted on the agenda are invited to do so. However, the commission is not able to undertake extended discussion or act on non-agenda items. Communication up to 3 minutes. Approval of minutes for last meeting. Everyone been able to look at the minutes of the last meeting? Are there any questions or corrections? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes for the last meeting?
Second.
That's a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Very motion carried.
You. New applications. First one, UID 21-08-003. This will be 14 East 15th Avenue. Hi. Yes, come on up. Sure. And then you might as well raise your right hand. I'll swear you in.
Okay.
You swear from the testimony you're about to give us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. You want to give us the rundown?
Yes. Avenue is on the. The new location of Barrio Taco Restaurant, and the applicant is seeking a new projecting sign. Each blade sign will be located above the storefront, standing high, and each sign will be about 22 square feet. Prominent with acrylic push-through letter. Internal LED signs will be mounted to the facade using mounting plate with bolts and a bolt. And then looking at their site, outlining there's some elevations. Here are the specs for this. And then here's another photo with the rendering of this. There additional elevation. And so after staff review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends pedestrian-oriented projecting signs, and that projecting signs be proportional to the building. Furthermore, the plan states that projecting signs be 6 square feet per side and located between the storefront display windows and below the second-story windowsills. Staff also notes that the sign is consistent with the 15th and high graphic plan that was conditionally approved by the board in May 2021. Although the sign is larger than 6 square feet, the sign is pedestrian-oriented and is located appropriately. And so as staff recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you please identify yourself for the record?
My name is Jim Kellum. I'm president of Bar Depot.
Thank you. Please go ahead with your, anything you wanted to add or part of your presentation.
I think that we got the example that we have, and I think there's a good idea of the sign we're gonna put up. It is a typical logo. It is the trademark logo that Barrow uses. It's a very simple sign. It's in black and white, and I think it's very appealing and should fit right in with the district.
Okay,
And that's for,
thank you. Is there anyone from the visiting public that wishes to speak on this case? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to commissioners for questions or comments.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could zoom in on this graphic. And my question, I don't have a problem with the larger size as long as this graphic has been presented faithfully to scale. I don't mind the larger size of the sign. I think it's in keeping and to scale with the architecture. My question to you is, do you need both of them?
we were looking for a visual in the east-west on the alley because we believe it's a high traffic area for foot traffic in the outside area. So we thought it would be appropriate and it would give us visibility from Ohio State.
So to be clear, in the image that we're looking at, the sign that's on the left is on High Street.
That's in High Street.
And the image to the right is on the plaza.
Right.
So where's the alley?
Is on the plaza.
Okay, so for me, they're too close together. And I don't think it helps, I don't think you need them both, certainly. It seems like you'd save some money if one or the other. It also seems that if you felt like you needed a sign perpendicular to the sidewalk at High Street, would it make more sense to move it further north?
It could, our space does not extend, it's about half of the windows in the front is the first. There's a door and then there's 3 windows.
Yeah.
I believe is the extent of our door front, and there is a protrusion that the sign is on both sides of the building. That would extend out over the sidewalk, so I believe for the sight line that was put in place.
And where is the entry to the restaurant?
Entry is to the right, it's between the 2 sides.
It's right between the 2 sides.
Correct.
Okay. I guess I can see an argument for both. I think one or the other is great and I really like it. But 2 of them, this seems overkill and unnecessary and confusing.
So to follow up on that, how far, I guess it would be east, so you capture the bay, well, it's not really a bay, it's almost a chamfered entry. But the 2, looks like they're fogged out, they got plastic on the windows, so you capture the 2 bays east for the crane, the sky crane.
Yeah, the first 3 windows, the 2 that are blanked out.
So I don't disagree with what Katie's saying, but I'm wondering if the one sign moved north and the other one moved east one day, if you feel like you've got to have 2 signs, but I don't disagree that those 2 being so proximate just seems like overkill.
Yeah, I think moving north would not be a problem. We had to submit these obviously to the landlord first and their approval prior to bringing it to the board. To move the other one east, there is, if you see just past the orange piece of machinery there where the building juts out, that is not our space. And I tend to think that it might block it a little bit.
My question then is, are there any other barrio graphics anywhere? Is this the total amount of name recognition signs you're gonna have? Or is
This is
there
it.
any other?
This is it. Yeah, we've had quite a few different schematics that we presented, and these are the ones that they.
And what about on the door, the entry door? Is there any graphics there?
Typically, there would be a sign that would list our hours of operation, and it would have the logo is more, it's used more than the barrio name.
Right. Which I think is good because given the regularity of the openings, to have the door have the graphics and time is valuable, and I'm sure it's lit up differently at night.
Yeah, and we'll try to get the logo on everything.
Yeah.
The name works well on the outside, but it's logo active.
Yeah, I just think it just looks unnecessary and somehow strange. It confuses me to say, why are there 2 of these? Whereas if I see one, it's really clear that that's the business and that's near the door. But the 2 of them, I find it really confusing.
Well, I think maybe if you only had one, I would suggest moving the one on the left to the corner that's facing High Street. Because that's the most prominent corner arguably in the
The
building.
one,
So just take off the one on the left,
That-
leave the one on the right.
Well,
take one off on the left and turn the other one.
in terms of, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that the sign ought to be facing High Street, because arguably, I mean, the plaza is visible from that building, the south elevation south. So you could see it from some distance east of there, but I think that if you limited the one on the right that's facing south and take the one on the left on High Street, just move it to the furthest southwest column.
I could see that. I would just.
Then I think it'd be more
I'd like
appropriate.
to just have, get a look at the sight line as you're going down High Street, to make sure it's not being blocked out by the column. I don't think it would be, I don't know the exact measurements of the count, but honestly, it seems to make sense, but,
One of the things we've recommended a number of times is to put on the diagonal in the corner. If you look at the Donatos, it's further north, they did that.
we presented this, and we didn't get approval for that.
You did not? Okay.
They had a fairly, excuse me, they had a fairly lengthy sign criteria. Guide what they gave us for construction. So we submitted, and then ultimately they opted to disregard that, go with it.
So you actually asked to have one protruding sign on the corner diagonal and they turned it down?
No, we had different variations of signs. One of them was on the diagonal for the logo, and then the other ones were gonna be the actual script and rear illuminated letters across the front of the building.
And they eliminated the script across
The
the
script
middle.
got shut down.
Well,
Excuse me, who's they?
The landlord.
which remember, Pasquale, we worked with Aaron and they did the signage
Yeah.
package for the building.
Right.
I mean, you've got such a great space. I was over there this morning and the terrace and the visibility from the plaza. I don't think you're gonna have any trouble developing a reputation of who you are in that site. So I think one sign is gonna work perfectly well.
Yeah, and again, I'm not as worried on the plaza because it's foot traffic. They're gonna be walking right by and see what's there.
Yeah.
You can always brand the windows or anything we have to the side, but I will, what are the steps to do that? Then like we resubmit and then come back?
No, we can approve it with the caveat as part of our recommendation that you have one sign as drawn. and
Okay.
approved.
All right, that's fine.
Frank?
Can I just,
Sure.
I know I came in late, but just a thought. If you absolutely had to have two signs, which apparently you don't, so maybe I should shut up, but, when I look at this, what bothers me more than anything else is they're both the same size. And, it would seem that if the sign on High Street were bigger, not a lot bigger, but bigger, and the turn sign that faces south, I guess it's on the south side. If it were smaller and lower, such that it was more of a pedestrian scale to the plaza sign, that they could be seen as a pair differently than if they were redundant. It's my only thought. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you, our original submission was gonna be it was about a 6-foot vertical right on the corner that was two-sided, that was, thought was very attractive, but, that didn't quite pan out, so I would be willing to go with the one sign. There you go. Actually, just keeping the project moving ahead.
So,
I would then make a motion that we approve the proposal exactly as drawn, the scale and size and dimensions, the same graphics, with one as opposed to two at the owner's discretion of which of the two they would like there. And if it's gonna be different than one of those two sites, you should come back for staff approval. If it's gonna be one or the other.
Just one or the other and it can go exactly where it's positioned in the drawing curve.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good.
okay, that's a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, that's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Next case, UID 21-08-004, 14 East 15th Avenue, Bubbles Tea walk-up window. Hi, welcome. Have you been sworn in yet?
No.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please identify yourself for the record.
Chris Jolly of Aaron Ricker.
Thank you. That's good.
Avenue is Bubbles Tea. The applicant is seeking approval to install a new walk-up window, north elevation. The walk-up window will be 4 feet across by about 3.5 feet tall, will match the finish of the existing store premises. Their application materials. Walk-up window. Here is the elevation. So I'm 15. some specs. Here's a rendering. It's a little difficult to see, but if we zoom in, see it right there. And then the graphics here have already been approved. So it's just this walk-up window piece. That's the corner of I 15 there.
Okay, great.
So after review, the application is consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends that new construction be compatible with the streetscape. And as the walk-up window is compatible with the existing building material and streetscape, staff recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add?
Not too much. I mean, basically, the window will be there to function for essentially walk-up traffic. They do have internal service as well, but this is to catch people off the street and so they can service people a little more efficiently and also, I think, in light of COVID as well, some outdoor service.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone from the visiting public that wishes to speak on this case? Seeing none, I'll open it up for comments or questions from the board.
Signage?
Signage was previously approved.
No, I meant for this.
Yeah, you said it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is, signage was previously approved. I wasn't part of that submittal, but this is the package of signage. I think it was sent.
I think that was already approved.
Yeah.
All graphics.
Next.
I'm sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding. All I meant was, were you gonna put any signage on the window?
Oh, I see.
That's all I wanted to know.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and were you planning on any cover?
No.
So this is it?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Belkis, could you show us where the signage is that we approved?
Where?
Yeah, where it's located.
Oh, well, for
That might
this
help.
window, there's some vinyl graphics that are
I see that.
little bubbles. And to be honest, I wasn't present when these graphics were approved, so I don't have any,
Maybe you could just pass that around.
what the graphics were.
So the signage cabinet above and
Yeah.
then vinyl graphics.
Is this window for servers or for the general public?
Above.
Okay. Okay, so right above this, it says bubbles.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
For future reference, a super great way to help us who look at a lot of stuff would be to just show the complete graphic, show it as you have there with, and just
Sure.
verify what's new.
Yeah, there was some
Yeah,
back and forth. We didn't want to seem like we're changing it or what.
sure, I understand.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for providing that.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
Just a question on the graphics. Your rendering shows a consistent horizontal line that's less in height than what is shown in that image. Are you changing the height?
I mean, they should be the same height all the way across. That vinyl graphic would be consistent. Dimension should be.
I think what's different is that the middle or the server window is gonna be, appears to be taller than the bubble graphics that occur on the left and right of it. So, I mean, for my part, it's that high on the left and right, I really don't care.
No,
It's modern at all, but it just is appears.
It should all be the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
I second.
Motion to approve in a second. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Thank you for coming. Next case, UID 21-08-005, 21 East 17th Avenue, Buckeye Corner signs. I know. Thank you. All right, please raise your right hand so we can swear you in. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And please identify yourself for the record.
My name's Jared Norton with Morrison Sign Company.
Thank you.
In the Wellington building, using the location of the The applicant is seeking wall signs and one projecting blade sign. The wall signs will be located above the store on the north and be approximately 21.7. The wall signs will be made of aluminum letters that are halo lit and mounted to the facade using tiles. The projecting blade sign will be about 3.3 square feet and 3 inches thick with 3 lettering logo and LED illumination. The projecting blade sign will be mounted to the facade using tiles. And submittal includes a site plan elevation, night view rendering, materials, mounting details. So materials here. Page. Here you have a site plan showing the location of where the signage will be. There's an elevation. Another elevation. And here are the backs of the sign. Close-up renderings. See the side profile of the sign and how it's attached to the side. After staff review, the proposal is consistent with the recommendation. And the plan recommends pedestrian-oriented projecting signs that are 6 square per side and located between storefront display windows and below second-story window sills. The plan also states that wall signs are to be limited in size to a maximum width of 2/3 of the width and maximum height of 1/3 of the height of the ground floor train, the cornice of the building. The plan also recommends internally lit channel letter wall signs. Both signs are consistent with the size, lighting, and area recommendations. Staff recommends it.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add?
Yes, so one thing, and I apologize, I just noticed this, in the staff report, I think it calls out 1 projecting sign, but there are 2 in this proposal here, so I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
Off the start. So if you're familiar with this area, these signs are essentially located at the intersection of 17th and Pearl. It's a ways off of High Street, so I think working with the client, we've recommended 2 signs, one on Pearl, one on 17th, just to make sure that there's visibility, just because they're so far back from High Street. I think you have a Huntington Bank there on the corner, and then you also have a coffee shop that sort of blocks anyone from High Street from seeing the sign. So that's our justification and reasoning for 2 signs. And aside from that, we feel pretty straightforward sign package for this type of store.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here from the visiting public that wishes to speak on this case? Seeing none, I will turn it over to the board for questions or comments.
Do we have any images of what's already there sign wise?
But we will street view like.
I don't think there's anything there right
That's correct.
now. That space has been occupied.
Correct.
And.
Oh, so that's that Pearl L.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So my concern here is the lettering going over the material seen. Is
Yeah.
that limestone or concrete?
It's a concrete finish.
I feel like something looks wrong. So one thing that looks wrong is the letter R is too close to the corner, no pun intended. So graphically, it's not,
Yeah.
more work needs to be done. I think I would work in the direction of reducing the size. I don't think you need the letters as large as they are. I think you could come down a good 6 inches. I think it would be much more successful graphically if the Buckeye corner actually lined up with the lower beginning of the masonry that comes up and aligns with the glass, and that starts where the word "the" aligns.
Yeah.
And then you give appropriate spacing between the end of the letter R and the turning corner. And I think you can center it on the lower masonry portion, right? The lower concrete limestone portion. So that's the Pearl Alley side. On 17th, you've already put it more appropriately within. I don't see any reason not to have the same size letter. So again, reducing it there, I think would be more effective. You're on the side street, so you see it, from not very far away. So I don't think you need as large a letters. I understand what you're saying about getting the traffic from High Street to come around the corner. So While I find the blade sign, clunky and blocky, I understand that you need it. How far does it project off the surface of the building?
It is flush against the wall, and it's 2'9", so less than 3 foot off that wall.
I don't have a problem with that. The only problem is my reading it, it's not, there's not a lot of detail. You just kind of slapped it on there graphically. So I'm trying to figure out how it's actually joined to the material. Again, got the same problem. You're crossing over the midline instead of locating it either in one panel or the other. In this case, you might want to put it on the upper panel. Because visibly from High Street, the eye level will draw you higher. And you said that's going to be lit up, LED illuminated.
Correct.
I think I'd lift the blade sign up so that it sat within the three.
Other comments?
No raceway?
No risk.
Well, I would echo everything KB said. I think you're gonna find it's gonna get considerably smaller, which is certainly fine by me. Probably around 60% or so, I'm guessing, of the for the size it is now. I didn't find any height for the letters on the drawing.
It says 2.6, doesn't it?
No, that's the height of the masonry.
Oh, sorry.
No,
1.6.
It does say it somewhere.
Yep.
18 inches. Okay. Well, you're probably gonna have to go down to something like 14 is what I'm guessing. Or less, but whatever it is, it is. Because, so anyway, that's all. I just wanted to know if they were, there was a raceway or not. You know, the downside, they're gonna put a million holes in
oh
the,
yeah,
so we can go either way on that. There's no good solution, honestly.
right. And with Halo, with the raceway, it doesn't light up correctly.
So you're pinning, you're offset, you're pinning, and they're
Correct.
offset and it's back.
It's
Is
back.
it only Halo? I'm sorry, I didn't look.
Yes,
at it.
it's only Halo.
It's only Halo. Okay, that's very nice.
Correct.
Yes.
Also great casting.
Other comments? Comments on the blade side or anything else?
The only comment I made on the blade sign was that it should be located within the concrete instead of over the seam.
And you want them always in line, do you not, or, because one, I thought I heard you say you'd like to go higher with one, didn't I hear you?
Lower at the other one to match it up with the other one, and it stays within.
Okay, so,
If you're standing looking at the pearl in the corner, you're gonna see them align around.
yeah, they're gonna
Same
line.
size.
Yeah, okay. That's fine.
But the blade doesn't have to play that game. The blade can go higher.
Okay. Any other comments? You have a motion.
Okay, I
You need to see,
I
Oh, I'm
move,
sorry.
I need to see the new drawings to know what size would do.
I don't think we do actually.
No?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't, but do you feel that way, Pasquale?
Well, then, we need to dictate what height the letters are and what the distances are from the ends and all that.
Which is what I'm gonna try to do if you give me a shot at it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to move that we approve, this signage package with the following changes in mind. That each of the signs on the building remain the same size letter, and they remain centered within the lower course of masonry trim. That the letters get reduced in size to be no larger than 16 inches, possibly smaller in height. And that the blade sign, like the other two signs, take a position within the masonry element. And the graphic designer should study whether that belongs in the upper panel or the lower panel.
Well done. Got that?
It works.
Okay, that's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
That's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion's approved.
Thank you. And just to be clear, do we send the revisions to staff for approval to make sure that they conform?
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
Great. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Next case, UID 21-08-006, 17 East Lane Avenue, Wings on Lane. Hello.
Hello.
If you would, please raise your right hand. I'd like to swear you in. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And please identify yourself for the record.
Yes, everyone. Andrea Russell, I'm the owner of Jar Graphic Design for licensed sign directors for this area, and we are representing our clients on Lane. We have
Great.
Thank you.
Want to go ahead and take this one?
East Lane Ave is near the southwest corner of West Lane Ave. Location of the windows. The applicant is seeking approval for one wall sign with four channel letters with LED illumination mounted to the facade. The submittal includes a site plan, elevations, materials, and mounting. So I'm looking at their submittal here. Here are the dimensions of the sign. Here you'll see the location of the sign along lanes and more towards the corner of the alley right here. Here are the specs of the sign, and you'll see the side profile there. And here's an elevation of the sign, so above the storefront, but below the fire trans. Here is a rendering of the sign. So after staff review, the proposal is consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends that wall signs be limited in size to a maximum width of 2/3 of the width of the building front, a maximum height of 1/3 of the height of the space between the ground floor, the transom, and the cornice, and utilize internally lit channel letters. As the proposed sign is consistent with the size, lighting, and material recommendations, staff recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to add?
that pretty much covers it. Thanks.
Okay, great. Do we have anyone here from the visiting public that wishes to speak on this case? Seeing none, turn it over to the board for comments or questions.
Compliment you on your submittal.
I have to give credit to Belkis because Belkis sent some examples for me to match it up. And I followed them to a T. So thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Belkis, and thank you for taking direction. I appreciate that. Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think it's done a fine job. I have no issue with it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a while, so I always like to improve.
Other comments?
Yeah, could you go back to the perspective? See, there's an inconsistency on the other drawings. This is storefront color and detail, but here it's that material. What is the action?
That's a photo, right? Is that a photo? Oh, go to street view, please.
The photo is the one that you read before that.
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah.
Yep.
That's the
Eagle eye, Grado.
I like the real better.
The ears don't work, but the eyes.
Yeah. The real's better than the red.
Yeah,
Clearly.
And I have a really subjective, maybe it's my bad eye, but it looks to me like the space between the L and the A is off, even though I realize it's not based on the dimensions, just the fact that an L has a big void on one side and the A tips back. So it bugs me, because all the other letters are tighter in that one.
Yeah.
One hole.
Generally, you do compensate for that. You make, well, kerning is when they overlap, but it's,
But you're a graphic designer, so what do you?
I struggled a lot with that spacing
Oh, man.
because it was driving me
Yeah.
bonkers. We can always alter it, push it in a little bit, make it, tight.
I think you should change the name. I mean, you should say wings on sane. Or wings on paint, wings on paint.
Other comments? That's well, anything? No. Good. We have a motion. That's a motion to approve as submitted. Do we have a second? With multiple seconds,
Got it.
take your choice. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next case, UID 21-08-007, 50 East 7th Avenue. If you would, I'd like to swear you in. Please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And please identify yourself for the record.
Joseph Patrick. Mike Shannon, attorney for the applicant. Okay, State Line Design.
Thank you very much.
Avenue is a 0.84 acre site within a two-story apartment building bounded by East 7th Avenue to the south, Lakeshore to the west, named alley to the north, and section alley. The applicant is conceptually proposing to demolish the existing apartment structures and construct a 6-story or 70-foot tall, 150-unit, 180-bed apartment building with 70 parking spaces at 0.38 spaces per bed. Portable units will be a part of the unit mix, although the exact quantity and affordability ratio is not yet defined. As part of the proposal, the applicant wishes to rezone the property from R4 to AR3 and has filed for the following council variances. 1, to increase the maximum permitted density from 1 dwelling unit per 700 square feet of lot area to 1 dwelling unit per 244 square feet of lot area. 2, to increase the maximum permitted lot coverage from 30% of the lot area to 82% of the lot area. 3, to reduce the required number of parking spaces by 187 parking spaces from 257 to 70. 4, to reduce the minimum front setback from 15 feet, average of nearest buildings on each side of the subject lot, to 4 feet. 5, to increase the maximum calculated floor area from 10,200 square feet to 123,497 square feet. 6, to increase the maximum permitted FAR from 0.8 to 3.4. 7, to increase the maximum building height from 35 feet to 70 feet. And 8, to reduce the minimum rear yard from 25% of the total lot area to 7% of the total lot area. In June, the applicant came before the board to receive conceptual feedback regarding the architecture and design of the proposal. The board expressed concerns about the proposed density and recommended that the building better address and activate the street. The board also requested additional section drawings and perspective drawings to better understand the building's context within the surrounding neighborhood. Today, the applicant is seeking approval for the rezoning and council variances that are associated with their conceptual development application. And since the submittal, the requested variances have remained the same, but the applicant has made the following revisions to the conceptual design, some of which respond to board comments about adjusting the street. They have refined the proposed facade materials, included balconies and refined landscaping along East 7th Street frontage. They have refined the lobby and amenity area designation and facade work in this area to highlight the building entrance. They replaced landscaping along the northern alley frontage with parallel on-street parking. They modified building massing and shifted floor plans to facilitate basement parking layout, and that includes reducing the square footage of both courtyard spaces by 137 square feet each, adding a slight step back on floor 4 along the northern alley facade, adjusting the step backs on the 5th floor along all facades, and reducing the step backs on the 6th floor along the northern, western, and southern facades. The board also requested conceptual street section drawings, which have been provided by the applicant. And the submittal also includes a variance listing and a conceptual site plan, unit matrix, floor plans, renderings, elevations, and time of day perspectives.
around Access Street.
Yeah, everyone has access to the staff report in the.
Yeah, it's there. Well, if you're reading it, would you like to read it from this?
Okay, so.
Oh, okay. Here, let me see.
Okay,
Read it
you
in?
want me to read it?
Sure.
That would be great.
Tell me
I think
where-
The next part is.
The board, staff analysis.
Staff analysis, all right, let me get to the right one. Staff analysis, including summary of any previous review, that one?
Yes.
Staff does not support the proposed rezoning and variances at this time. Current proposal is generally not consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends lower density residential use, which has a maximum floor area ratio of 0.4, a minimum of 2 parking spaces per unit, and a maximum building height of 35 feet. Staff consideration for the proposed higher intensity development will be based on appropriate mitigating factors for the increased intensity, including design and affordable housing. While the applicant is requesting support for the rezoning and variance only, staff recommends the applicant illustrate design that will mitigate any impacts of the requested variances. The plan recommends that the primary facade of ground level multifamily buildings include entrances, stoops, porches, and balconies to contribute to street activity. The building material will be used to provide visual interest and texture to the building, and that taller buildings, including step backs on upper stories, to provide relief to the streetscape. The plan also states that setbacks for residential buildings be between 10 feet and 30 feet, and that parking variances should be reviewed with consideration of the presence of on-street parking, extent of the variance requested, and the size and nature of the use. The current proposal includes balconies to address 7th Avenue, step backs on the northern and eastern facades to transition to the neighborhood, and affordable housing. Staff appreciates these design features and requests the following design updates to mitigate the impacts of the proposed rezoning and variances. Number 1, a commitment to high quality materials. Number 2, provide stair access to the second floor terraces from 7th Avenue to activate the street. Number 3, provide additional building entrances along 7th Avenue. Number 4, to increase the step back along the northern building frontage on floor 4 and add additional landscaping at grade along the alley frontage. Number 5, provide 0.5 parking spaces per bed. University District Plan recommends a 0.75 spaces per bed in areas recommended for higher density residential uses. Staff recommends that a 0.5 spaces per bed be provided based on the plan's parking recommendation for higher intensity residential use and the project's adjacency to public transit on High Street.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done,
you.
Frank.
Well
I can read.
done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I would like to address the rezoning request and the council variance request. Again, it's our hope this evening that we'd be able to call the question on those. I guess this discussion will be determined about that.
Okay.
I am excited to be here tonight for a number of reasons. Civilian viewpoint, I think it's a very attractive market rate housing project. I think they've tried to incorporate a lot of staff's comments in the direction we were given from the board. And also, all the development I've done in the university area over the years, this is the first one I've done that has an affordable housing component. 20% of these units would be between the 80% and 100% the adjusted median income, so they qualify as affordable housing. And again, it would be 20% of the total units. This is also somewhat uncharted water for me, in so much as I have unanimous approval of the Wayne Civic Association by a vote of 24-0. Quite frankly, I had very little, if anything, to do with that vote. My clients rolled up their sleeves and engaged a diverse group of neighborhood residents from Whiteland Park and obviously the Euclid Avenue folks and the church. And for an 8-week period, they negotiated in good faith with the assistance of UAC members, Whiteland members, and even some volunteers. One of them is here this evening. And the byproduct of that is an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, It goes into a lot of commitments that you cannot make in a zoning text. For example, there were some commitments to the church that we make a good faith effort to have minority contractors involved in construction of the building and ultimately employ people. And for that, there are a number of other things that would be off-site commitments that are not properly in the zoning text. And I think as Lyman and my clients should be commended for the 8 weeks worth of work they put in that facilitated buy-in by the community. Very first meeting was a very meeting, substantial opposition, and we were able to have 11 people testify on behalf of our case at the zoning committee level. And then when we prevailed at the University Area Commission, all 3 of the district members from the Wineland Park area on that board voted in favor of this project. The zoning is pretty straightforward. It's zoned R4. The building there now is a bastardization of the R4 zoning category and is a non-conforming use, does not comply with the FAR, doesn't comply to the setbacks, it doesn't comply to the density requirements. So there was some initial pushback because it was alleged that we needed a question.
Sorry, Mike, no, I was.
Initial pushback because they wanted to know what the hardship was for our variances. And at the full commission, I could better explain the fact that a hardship is necessary for a use variance. This board has seen dozens of use variances. And for example, in the C4 district, to have a residential use on the ground floor requires a use variance, and you must demonstrate a hardship. All of the variances we are seeking are not use variances. We are seeking the AR3 zoning. All of our variances are development standard variances. The standard with the legal threshold for a development standard variance are the so-called Duncan factors. And if you have the application available, or if it's on the computer, or whatever, I'd be referring to our statement of practical difficulty. But I will go through those standards and why we think our variances meet them. And I would also point out that, again, this is not a use standard. When you do a use standard, an economic hardship does not a hardship make. However, when you do a practical difficulty development standard variance, there is an economic component that you can rightfully take into consideration. And I'll try to articulate that. Again, as a preface, I did say that the existing building is a non-conforming use. Further justification for the AR3 zoning request, which is request number 1. And then the variances would be handled as a package and separate bill. And if the Duncan standards are the Supreme Court case that set the standards for development standard variance. And number 1 is whether the property in question will yield a reasonable return or whether there can be any beneficial use of the property without the variance. Obviously, they can maintain it now on some market rate housing project now. So there would be some return. But obviously, when they bought the building, it walked like a duck, it looked like a duck. And, they thought it would facilitate market rate development. We feel that it will not offer a reasonable return based on the market conditions as they are now. Number 2, whether the variance is substantial. I think only an attorney can argue that these variances are not substantial. On their face, they appear to be substantial. Variance in particular. But when you look at the other factors, these factors are not all inclusive. Number 1, it's not a balancing act where you need to get 4 out of the 7 to prevail. It's an assessment of all the factors. The third one is whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or whether adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. And this merits discussion because I understand that we're not in the regional commercial corridor on High Street. And if we were in that corridor, 6 of these 8 variances would not be necessary. The only 2 would be the height of the parking. But lines on the land use map do not enable developments in direct proximity to the site to find the characteristics of the neighborhood. So when you look at the uncommon and which is directly to our west with the church in between us, if you look at the other developments that have gone on in the neighborhood, and if you factor in the fact that we are directly across the street from a grocery store with a 2-acre parking lot, we do not think that we are adversely changing the essential character of the neighborhood. We're replacing a dated, non-code compliant market rate housing with a state-of-the-art modern facility that will not only have market rate housing, but will have affordable housing. The fourth standard is whether governmental services would be adversely affected by the development. I think the answer obviously there is no, they will not. Number 5, whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restrictions. These gentlemen are sophisticated developers. They obviously knew what they were buying in terms of a market rate multi-unit facility. But they'll get into a little bit more detail about the archaic parking calculations that are used in the R4 development standards, which we are thankful and respectful of the fact that staff gravitated to 0.5 spaces per bed in their buy-in into the density argument, which would offset some of the things that they were concerned about. 6, whether the property owner's predicament can be feasibly be obviated through another method. It's my opinion that these variances are necessary to make the project go forward. And the last one is whether the spirit and intent of the zoning code be observed and a substantial justice done by granting of the variance. Obviously, the primary purpose of the zoning code is the public safety, health, and welfare protection, not only of our property values, but of neighboring property values. There's a ton of studies that indicate the market rate housing and even the affordable housing component actually increase value of surrounding residential property, which would be our neighbors in the neighborhood. So again, these factors are non-exclusive. They're obviously you can take into consideration. But we gave these 7 standards to the full University Area Commission. We were able to prevail at that level as well. So we're here before you today. Neighborhood support with unanimous approval from the Wineland Civic Association for both the zoning and the variance. And the vote at UAC was closer by 9-7-1 or 10-7-1. Sorry, I forget exactly. A little bit of deal thought. But we did meet the burden. Project similarly situated before this board, a lot of emphasis was put talking about community, but listening to our neighbors, getting input from our neighbors, and getting granular with our neighbors and keeping them involved in the process. The MOU that we do have in place here was done a certain period of time, but it keeps the Wineland folks at the table as we go through this process through completion and thereafter. So for those reasons, I'll conclude my zoning presentation and turn it over to Joe and Carl to go through the new information about changes they've made since the last hearing, unless the chair would prefer otherwise.
Nope, please continue.
Okay, and then I'm going to move. So
Okay.
And I'll take notes from you. Can
Thanks, Mike. Again, my name is Joe Patrick, and what I wanted to do is just kind of add a little bit of color to what Mike had just kind of went through a lot of that, some of the details of it. But I guess part of this process, there's obviously more to the story. So I wanted to give a little bit of history of how we got to where we are, real briefly, and then I'll let Carl kind of walk you through it. A little history of how we got to where we are today. So one of the things that's a little bit unique to Columbus as when we kind of started working into the market here was the involvement with the neighborhood. And Mike had touched on that, and it's a process that we don't often see in a lot of other communities. You know, they're public hearings or brief presentations, but the fact that the neighborhoods are very involved in it here led us to want to get engaged with them right away. And the intent was, it's more than just a presentation. It's us sitting down with them and kind of working back and forth with them. And unfortunately, we couldn't sit down with them in person for obviously obvious reasons. But so we did our best to
get engaged with this community was actually closer to 12 weeks, like I mentioned. It was closer to 12 weeks on a weekly basis of back and forth with the neighborhood, the Winding Park Civic Association. And it was often a contentious process. And there was a lot of give and take that had happened during that process. And I know you guys may not see where things started on, but there was a lot of time for us listening to what the neighbors asked for and responding to that. And while what you see and where we are today may not fit exactly into the recipe of the university district plan, and we understand that, we feel that it does respond and was acknowledged and accepted with the input from the neighbors. And we kind of feel that that's really the important folks, in this community, the ones who are actually going to walk by this and see this every day and live with this every day. So I want to make sure that that's kind of an important element that doesn't get lost here. That the unanimous vote was the result of a lot of hard work and a lot of back and forth and a lot of often contentious times with things. But everybody was, I think, in the end, professional and understanding. And after walking the site with a number of the neighbors and walking them with renderings and explaining where elements would actually sit on the site and how tall they would actually really be and where some of the doors and driveways and things like that would be, everybody had a much better understanding. And I felt really good about that process. And while it was, different for us, I think it was a really good process for us to go through. I think it resulted in what we see as a really nice project at this point. There's certainly more to go and refinement to be had ahead of us. I think it was a good process for us to get to where we are today. Mike had mentioned that that process resulted, obviously, in unanimous vote for one Civic 60, which was very important. But it also resulted in this MOU, which one of the stipulations of that MOU was certainly that, knowing that we had kind of come through the UID process later, that they would allow, obviously, the design changes and some of the refinement that happened with this group. So even though every element of it is not 100% defined from that, they understand it and gave us, obviously, within that the levity or the latitude, I should say, to work with this group. Continue to refine and develop the city as a whole. After that process, I want to explain a little bit that the Winding Park Association expressed their gratitude in a number of different ways, either in letter form or personal form after that process for us being a developer that came to the community and was willing to do a number of things that they haven't seen happen before. One of them was to come and sit down and listen and respond to their comments, and they haven't had that for them. That was new as well, so they really appreciate it. They're also, we're happy to see that we would be providing 20% affordable housing. That was something that they hadn't seen. It was very important. And lastly, which I know this is a item for discussion, but they were really happy to see a developer would be willing to take the risk of under parking a new development in the area. And while parking is always a point of contention, having someone take the risk of providing housing within a neighborhood that will not overburden the existing infrastructure was kind of a breath of fresh air for a lot of people. So we understand everybody has cars and more people need more cars, but if you can do that in such a way that the risk falls upon us as a developer, and you're willing to take that risk, and it isn't as bad a burden as it might be for this. So we appreciate that, and that it shows that you're really interested in the community and the project for what you're doing. So for us, that meant a lot. I wanted to make sure that I pass that along to this group. Mike had touched a little bit on the UAC votes, but it doesn't mean we're in the full committee. And while the numbers are the numbers that they are, one of the things I think is worth noting is that when that process started, there was a number of UAC members who were pretty adamantly and vocally against our project. And as the presentations went on and as the discussions went on, there were a few of them who actually realized that and were swayed by our, I guess, arguments, if you want to call it that, our presentations and our project, to realize and to take part and vote in support of our project and accept the fact that they felt that the variances presented here were not so egregious that it outweighed the value that our project provided for them. And that was a big step for us. It also was a big positive boost that people started to realize that. We understand that the variances may seem excessive in some cases, but, you know, if you pick them apart a little bit and you weigh them against the value the project can provide for the neighborhood and the full support of the neighborhood, we feel that it's a good equation and it ends up being what we feel adding a lot of value to the neighborhood in the big picture, which I think is what we want to do, is ultimately. So, we appreciate the time and being able to present this to you, and I wanted to make sure that we hope that this group will do the same as some of the other previous groups have, where they go into it with an open mind and are willing to kind of listen and take into account the overall benefits of the project to the neighborhood locally as well as to the community at large. So with that, I'll let Carl kind of get into a little more of the specifics of it. Let's see if we can share. Yeah. Oh, it's not gonna really. That's big.
It's great for us to actually be here in person. I know it's been a challenge trying to work through things through Zoom and team meetings, but it's nice to actually be sitting here face to face. So I appreciate the chance that we get to do that. I want to just sort of, I guess, look at where we came from. The last time that we shared information with you, it was very, very sketchy. And we appreciate you being patient and adding input to that early phase of work. And we want to have a chance to share with you just kind of where we've come from and what we've done. There are 5 areas, you kind of heard this already tonight, that I will just touch base on really quickly. One is that, from the meeting a couple months ago, we heard from you and from the neighborhood the idea about the scale and the massing of the building. We heard about the development and articulation of the entry a little bit better. We heard and listened to the idea of how do we have a little bit more street activation. Some better idea about what building materials were. I mean, the last renderings that we showed again were just massing models, and there really wasn't much to really be able to articulate and talk about. And the last thing was that you had, and rightfully so, asked for, can we see more drawings? Can we get a better sense of what it is that we're showing? And so those 2 things were the addition of more perspectives, and all of them are taken from a 6-foot high camera view. So just we're looking at, we did talk about that. As architects, we can play a game. So just want to make sure that we're aware that everything we're showing is from 6-foot vantage point. And then you also asked about for additional, ideas about the sections and some site cuts. So all that's kind of in here now. And I know we've got, from time perspective, I don't want to get too bogged down, but I guess the best thing to do is just kind of run through these drawings.
Can I stop you for a minute?
Sure.
Since we've already seen this before, is there, and I think I can speak for the board, what we're looking for is what's changed.
Sure.
So we've seen that. Let's talk about what's changed.
Yeah,
We've reviewed
We-
the drawings.
We've looked at it.
Great at this spot.
Okay.
We'll have some questions, but you could just talk about what's changed, and then we can
Okay,
get
well,
it
then,
discussed.
We have been working and then internally started trying to work with some planning. So that's kind of an internal piece, but the pushing and pulling. So I guess I would just say from the plan perspective, it's probably better to go to maybe the renderings and talk about
Could you,
those.
no, for me, the plans are more helpful. Could you articulate on that ground floor plan where the entrances are into the building?
Sure, okay. So on that left, that amenity area, that is the main entry into the building. It's a 2-story amenity space or piece there, but that's
Everybody everyone who lives in the building has to go through that door.
Yes, well,
They
they
go to parking.
could come from the parking in the elevators with card access. Or they could actually come into the building through the parking as well. But
If you go back to the main level plan, the way the plan is set up, that is really the only way they could get in. You've got stair and elevator for security reasons, for fire exit at opposite ends of the corridor system.
correct.
But as it's set up right now, that is the only way one could come in off the street.
And where is Cortland?
Portland would be down, so this is set up, so this is.
Yeah,
the,
I
you know,
actually know where Cortland is. I'm
Yeah, so it's gonna
surprised
be
that you're
stacked.
you're not showing the deadhead of Cortland.
Yeah, so it would be,
Because the fabric is different, right? It's parking lot, west side of Cortland. houses on the east side of Cortland.
Yeah.
Yet I don't see anybody talking about that. Curious about that.
Yeah, Portland is roughly, kind of between that gray courtyard to the right and, the orange piece.
About, what, 2/3?
2/3
Yeah,
from the
it's-
left or a third in from the right.
Yeah, it kind of straddles where the drawing title is and that little box with graphics.
Belkis, could you show us, an aerial view of existing? The better,
There is also a perspective in there.
As Malcolm is pulling that out, I have a question about all of the A1 units. How do they get any light, air, or views into those units?
Well, everything has got, they've all got, every unit has got a window access for both bedroom and a living space.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
The A1 units look like they have a small balcony. What's the dimension of that balcony? Even if that's glazed all around,
Well,
There is no
so
cross
the
ventilation.
A1's in the corner, so the balconies, are probably 10 by 6 feet.
10 by
10 by
6.
6.
so there's no cross ventilation. You can only get daylight or natural air into a tiny proportion of the square footage of that unit. How is that unit laid out?
Well, I'll be honest with you, that's part of what we're doing right now, is working on plans and refining that. That's part of what we're actually doing
They're
today.
actually doing that today. So
I would draw your attention to those particular units, especially since they're on multiple floors. I think those are very, very difficult units to rationalize or to validate. And I'm very interested in your 20% affordable housing. And to me, that's one of the strongest arguments to support this project. Nonetheless, those units need improvement, whether you cut away from some of the, is it B2, the orange ones in front, so that you can get some more light, daylight and air into that facade. But at this point, I think that you've got a real architectural challenge, a real design challenge to make those units viable. Can you tell me a little bit more about the affordable housing ambitions that you have? What makes 20% of the building affordable? Are the units all the same, but there are 20% subsidies, or are there differences in the units that will make them fall in a different market category?
well, the 20% will be spread across all unit types. So it will not be all studios or all one bedroom.
Okay,
Our intent is, and so they'll be spread across all units.
so how does that subsidy work in this case?
Logistically, I mean, as far as they're, in order to be able to rent those units, they have to verify that their income meets the requirement of 80% being higher.
Is this LIHTC? This is LIHTC?
Low income housing tax credits?
I don't know that answer exactly.
So you're administering it?
Yeah.
You're not, there is not a credit that you're getting that has a set of rules by how it's administered?
I honestly, I don't have that exact answer. I'm not 100% sure how that's administered.
It's my understanding that this is a community reinvestment area as well as an opportunity zone, and I do not believe they're going for state tax credits on it. So,
Low income housing tax credits are federal. They come from the US government,
Right.
HUD, not state.
Well, and what goes with them is a whole set of rules about how it happens. What you're suggesting is something that is voluntary?
No, I would say that it's voluntary. I'll be honest with you, I don't know the logistics of how it's verified, how their income is verified in order to qualify.
That's not an issue. That's not difficult. From a design standpoint, the issue is, as the designer of this housing, you have a strategy. Either people come in and they bring a voucher or they bring their eligibility, and you are providing a certain number of units that serve, and you as the owner take the voucher
Yes.
to offset. That's one way in which affordable housing happens, as long as you get approval that your project is going to fall into the Section 8 category, that it's going to follow the guidelines that go with that. Otherwise, as Francis said, low-income housing tax credits is a different kind of program, but you as a designer have to be cognizant and design a project that will meet the standards of those programs. So you need to know what that is to be able to say that you're providing a building in this 20% affordable units, which I support. I can't tell you how much I support that notion. But I'm not feeling very confident right now that you guys know what you're doing.
It's got to run with the dirt, you know, it can't be at your will. It can't be just because you decided to do that for this month. You know, it's got to be something that encumbers the property. You know, and it has to be administered in a way that is proper.
Correct, and I can, without knowing the logistics of the administration and of how that happens, I'll be blunt. I'm confident in saying that we will administer it as a proper. I mean, regardless of what that means, and which I don't understand exactly the requirements of that. But from a design perspective, we would address them. I mean, obviously meeting all of the housing and urban development requirements and ADA requirements of a typical units, whether it's a studio or a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. I don't know if the administration of that would necessitate a change in the size of the bedroom, for instance, or a toilet.
Well, I've been involved in a project like this that I've built, and the commitment we had to make was that there is no difference in the unit.
And there isn't,
These are all the same. No difference in materials, no difference in.
that is the intent.
There is no stigma
And you
related.
said that.
That is absolutely the intent. Units will all be finished exactly the same, they'll be sized. I mean, a 2-bedroom will be a 2-bedroom. Obviously, some of them will have different, depending on the configuration of the building, but they will not.
They raised the issue about the A1 units.
And it's, I'll be honest with you, Carl and I spent some time this afternoon going through that. We've got a number of different solutions, and the first option was exactly what you had said, is let's steal a little room from the units that are directly below. We'll add a little bit more room to get another window that goes directly to the outside, and we change the configuration of that balcony.
Because this is one of those changes too, where last time, you know, we really weren't creating balcony spaces and sort of openings in the building. And that's one of the things that, you know, again, early on as we move through conceptual design, we are making those kind of moves, which we didn't have last time.
And we acknowledge and we appreciate the feedback, and we acknowledge and we understand that this process with the DRD committee is it's an ongoing process. It's not a one-time done and move on. So we fully expect that your feedback will help refine and develop some of these items, which normally happen as the design process goes through schematic design development, and even into construction documents. So it's, while we don't have that exact solution of every window and every door right now, we fully expect that we will provide, we're not going to provide a unit that has inadequate light and accessibility for reason. So I would just like to let everyone know that we're going to be part of the process, and we fully expect to keep moving on the process with your group.
All right, so one of the things I heard about the staff recommended was more stair access to make more social activity visible from the street, from Seventh Avenue. I realize that those courtyards have parking underneath and would compromise the privacy of the units around the courtyard. So I would not support public stairs and public access there. Instead, what I would support is a stronger section development of the social quality of space, and especially better planted spaces on that sidewalk, because south facing, if you have really good deciduous trees on that side, you're going to help the heat impact and the solar buildup in the units. I can't tell from the dimensions on the site plan that you have enough space to do that, but that looks like to me a better option, making the elements that you're showing suggest we have seating and landscaped areas. To me, they're stingy and underdeveloped at this point. So it looks to me like developing those 2 raised cutout platforms need a lot more study as to what they're going to do for the views down from the residents and to keep a certain modicum of privacy to the units that sit around them. And then much more street development to honor what staff has recommended, but to make that a really good area. Kroger's across the street. You mentioned all the collaborators you've worked with and all the people you've been listening to. You've been listening to Kroger.
We have not listened. We did not engage with.
I mean, I don't know how you work with corporation. What's that?
What advantage?
Well, Kroger's gonna have issue with the parking, because people are gonna park across the street.
Are they have an issue?
Before we go any further back and forth with discussion, I just want to, because this is the way we usually do it, see if there's anyone from the public that wishes to weigh in, and then we can go back and forth with the
Yeah,
questions and
absolutely.
feedback. Okay. Okay. Have you submitted? Okay. Please stand. Raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony you have to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Okay, please identify yourself for the record. Okay. Yeah, please go ahead. Please limit your comments again to 3 minutes or less. Go ahead.
I will. I'm Kathy Fox. I live in Dennison Place, a neighborhood adjacent to Vineland Park. I'm professionally trained in mediation and alternative dispute resolution. I volunteered to work with the Vineland Park Community Civic Association and the developer to talk through their differences on this project to see if an agreement could be reached. And I'm here this evening to speak on behalf of that facilitated process. The process was open to everyone in Vineland Park who wanted to participate. After an initial meeting to gather all the concerns from the neighborhood, we met weekly for many weeks to work through all the issues. Vineland Park set up a file share so that all neighbors could view the materials as the discussions proceeded. The developer made a number of changes to their proposal to address neighborhood concerns, including lowering the height, reducing the number of units, and stepping the building back away from the neighborhood door. There were also a number of operational issues, including minority business participation, noise, alleys, garbage, parking and car share, pet waste, et cetera, et cetera. The developer met with residents of Euclid Avenue and walked the area to look at the impact of height, which was minimal with the step backs. And the neighbors were satisfied with the changes. Fearless also met with the 7th Avenue Church and walked the surrounding area with them. That meeting illustrated that the church is not currently visible westbound on 7th Avenue due to existing features. This proposed building does not lessen the visibility of the church. The Civic Association and the developer reached an agreement and signed an MOU documenting the commitment to reduction in height, unit count, and the step backs. The MOU is clear that all design-related issues are expressly subject to UIDRB's review and certificate of approval process. The 7th Avenue Church was also a party in the negotiations during all the meetings. Following the meetings, they elected to withdraw from the negotiations. This was their right and the right of every party involved. Nevertheless, the developer has included in the MOU a number of provisions that will benefit the church. As the facilitator of the negotiations, it's my opinion that the agreement is fair and greatly benefits Vineland Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there another?
We have one more speaker.
Okay. Please come on up, raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you have to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please identify yourself for the record.
Jim Sublett. I'm a member of the University Area Commission and chairman of the zoning committee.
Okay.
Thank you. It was, first of all, my intention is not to take an advocacy position here at all, but to report to you factually. And in that regard, I submitted to Douglas and she conveyed to you a statement summarizing the action that took place, which I hope you received, I'm sure you have.
Yes.
I'm standing here, speaking pretty spontaneously, simply to resolve what I think was a misunderstanding that I heard as I came in. I had huge respect and experience with Mr. Shannon, and I happily acknowledge that he wasn't present at the first of the zoning committee meetings in which the pushback that he refers to took place. But having been there, I can say that a confusion over the distinction between a statement of hardship and one of technical difficulty was not a substantive issue in that, and certainly wouldn't have resulted in a second negative vote a month later. Instead, the report that was submitted to you contains 5 points that were drawn from the committee report to the full commission. And at that time, Michael Kellmeyer, co-chair of the zoning committee, and I stated that we would bring those to your attention so that you could consider those in your deliberation. I'm standing here only to hopefully keep those from being discounted as part of a misunderstanding statement, a misunderstanding on the technical definition of hardship versus technical difficulty. In fact, I think they are issues of substance that were of concern to a significant number of the commission members. Thank you for this spontaneous and unplanned opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'll now open it up.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
number one, I apologize for not having a better answer on the affordability. I need to clarify that. Because we are in the CRA, in order for us to qualify for a 15-year tax abatement, we are mandated to have 20% of it be affordable housing. So, okay.
Okay.
And then Carl did not get to go through the presentation to show changes that were made. If you're going to give
I think you guys have been presenting now for almost 45 minutes. And I think the questions that we have, we've read the graphics, we've looked at them. And so perhaps a dialogue would be a more fruitful way to go forward. In other words, I think you've come and said you're open to our recommendations around design. So we probably can make recommendations aside from getting a full visual presentation from Carl when we've already seen the material.
Yeah. If I could, I'd like to go like very much higher level than where we've been, okay? About 2 issues, the variances and the planning of this, not the design of it, not the details of it, but the gross planning of it. So and I'm trying to think about the zoning in as simple manner as I can think about it, okay? Because there's too many pieces to it. So, how I'd like to think about it is, Mike, you touched on it, that if this project were on High Street, most of the zoning variances would go away. And that's what I would hope we would say, because in a way, I think this is part of High Street, okay? Because of the parking lot, in my opinion, because of the parking lot. And that parking lot's going to be this big, wide open asphalt forever, probably. And, so I see the frontage on it as being very similar to the frontage on the west side of it in terms of how it may address the parking lot. So I'm okay thinking about this as a High Street project, okay? So I ask you, of the number of variances that you said would go away, the ones that wouldn't go away, I want to know what those are, and I want to look at those in relationship to the 80-20. I don't know why 80% of the project shouldn't be pretty much consistent with what we've approved with other projects, and maybe the 20% is where there's leeway. I don't know, but I'm trying to come up with a way to think about this that is rational and is defensible against future requests, okay? So that's one set of things. The other set of things comes from the gross planning here. I asked about Portland, because number one, I think your entrance is in the wrong place. I think the entrance needs to be opposite Portland if only for the reason that your tenants are going to be going to that Kroger store all the time. And they're not going to go to a crosswalk if the entrance is to your building is mid-block. So, it would seem to me that it would be a much safer situation to put the entrance at Portland where there is at least an implied crosswalk because of the intersection. The other things about the gross planning, to me, I would like to see explored, and it may be a wrong avenue, but I'd like to see it at least talked about, is there a difference between how the building is expressed opposite the parking lot as opposed to how the building is expressed across from, single-family homes. I'd like to at least hear about that as an idea. I'm not in, and I don't know, I don't understand your stepping. I don't understand even why it necessarily should step. It might be that the building needs to be 7 stories between Cortlandt and the alley or and the church. And the rest of it be 2 story. I don't know, but I think it's worth talking about as to how to do that. But so far, what I've seen is pretty much an extrusion from east to west, and I'm not convinced that an extrusion, taking that idea and extruding it east to west, is fully responsive to some of the opportunities on the site. And so those are just my gross thoughts about the basic planning of the box or the box heads. And then my questions about the zoning. So that's what I'm interested in right now, not so much the details.
Let me ask you a question. Frank, we all saw the project on Ninth, Brody Group, and
Mhm.
I mean, that was a similar situation. As AR4 and variances mostly had to do with, because AR4 gave you 2 stories, how's this one different?
I don't know. Is it different? And maybe.
I'm not sure it is.
Okay, so if it's not, then what did we grant there? And
We gave them 5 stories. What do you remember?
we gave them height,
We gave them height, we gave them,
but I don't think we gave them any big, I don't think we gave them a parking variance anywhere to this.
Not any close to this.
No.
well, no, that's, so that's a second. So the way I see it, like, those guys got density, max lot coverage, front and rear setback, building size, everything except park. It was, it was the whole, who was the guy that used to be on this staff?
Oh,
Ian Furlong.
no.
No,
Holland,
Patrick?
no, it was, he
Patrick.
was their tax,
Oh,
he was their advisor. Way before.
I don't know, keep going.
Anyway, he was talking about it was a weird property or site.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't part of the, but it was AR4, so they asked for a bunch of. They got like a 6-story building, lot line.
A lot of entries off the street.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, so I think that is a substantial point of difference that I think.
So when they went through a series of design iterations, they ended up with something that was a language on the street with the moving.
Well, and I think they all still have that obligation. So it seems to me like, I guess the question is, they're here today for variance. And are we interested in providing that with the understanding that there's no time? Because I agree with you, Katie. I think that project addressed the street way better. And, there was a long process of design refinement.
Yeah.
This is I just, so A, precedent is very important. But B, from staff's perspective, we want to ensure that conceptual drawings that are presented, excuse me. So we wanted to make sure and ensure that the conceptual drawings that are being presented, that the board, we recommend that a vote on the variances be taken only once the board is comfortable with the conceptual drawings.
Okay.
Because the design and the way the building is mass and fenestrated mitigates or has the opportunity to mitigate that, that they've like the vote.
They should
That's
be.
if we're comfortable with conceptual drawings.
Sure.
be taken.
Right. So you're saying, Belkis, that the vote on the variances should be taken when satisfied with the design, because
Conceptual.
satisfaction of the design weighs on whether or not we should. Okay.
Yes.
Johnny, where were you going with the zoning?
Well,
Because I thought I gave them a pretty big window to be within. But
yeah, well, I guess my take is the zoning variances seem reasonable. They're not that different than the other building. And I think to your point, Frank, the site in some ways is more visible. The only other variance question I had is, Belkis, in your staff report, you said 0.5 parking spaces per unit. Your unit matrix is 130.
It's 0.5 spaces
Per bed.
per bed.
Okay.
So currently they're proposing, or conceptually, that number is still in flux. But the university area plan for high intensity residential areas recommends 0.7 spaces per bed. So
Right.
you're like, okay, this is high intensity residential, we're willing to wiggle, if you will,
But it would still
to
be.
the 0.5, but currently we're there. So there's a little bit of a gap there.
And that's what I'm talking about. I think they've gone overboard a little bit on some of it, quite frankly.
For me, one door to the building is conceptual design.
Well, I mean, and I think this is sort of, maybe this is kind of what gets to the heart of it. So if I kind of take what Belkis is saying, it seems to me we're not going to vote on zoning approval. Substantial questions being raised about design, and I would agree with you, KB, that I think the way the building meets the street is probably not. I mean, I'm reading the plans. It's correct me if I'm wrong. The entrance is into leasing and ride sharing. Because amenities.
Well, that's a lobby.
It's a lobby
right? It's the lobby space. It's public. I mean, it's.
So is that a risk?
It's down below.
Is that a
Next
risk?
floor plan.
That is the difference. So you come in, it's not uncommon to come into a lobby space. And when you say leasing, there could be a leasing office off of the lobby. There could be an open desk.
Yeah, I've done multiple. But just,
Every single individual has to go in and out the same door.
yeah, I mean, I think I would agree. I think the way it meets the street is not there. I mean, Belkis might have something to the way the courtyard meets the street, but I think the design team clearly needs to do more.
Well, that's, I think, another argument, KB, for making the entrance more middle than not, if it's
Well,
only
there-
going to be.
Couple of things, let's just touch base on that, that's okay, real quick. So I guess sort of our thinking process so if you come in the parking deck, you underground, and you'll go to probably the elevators, what you'll probably do. But if you're a pedestrian, and we were kind of looking at kind of where we thought like traffic flow is probably greatest, and our thought was that you are while yes, you will have people going to the grocery store, there's also a crosswalk. There's no crosswalk anywhere in place right now unless you go down to High Street. So thought was, for safety reasons, that's where you want the traffic going. The other thought was being that if you're looking at kind of what is a pedestrian activity, where are people coming and going to, that they're moving more towards High Street, up the street if they're going to campus, that you're encouraging kind of pedestrian traffic to go that direction, as opposed to necessarily coming in from the single family side. Now, is there a way to sort of work, another entry point, further up the building? Answer would be, yes, there is. I still kind of feel like if I were trying to focus on where is the building lobby and where am I trying to encourage most of the traffic to go, it would be still at that end because of the High Street.
Until I have to go to the grocery store.
Well,
So the urban
But
perspective is
really,
certainly one really important way to think about how people flow and move around the area. The other thing is from within those corridors, right? You've got, for fire safety and so on, you've got the public stair and elevator at the opposite ends. At that easternmost side of the building, if people can get to the street and come in and out that way, you're serving at least half of the residences in the building, because that's the direction they want to go, instead of taking the entire corridor system to the opposite end. It's kind of common sense.
well, and we can, we're kind of looking at some of that, because the other thing that you can do is that also allows you, especially on the east side, that allows you to access the courtyard from that entry level. So you've got a little bit of a connection there if you to do that. Again, I think that, we looked at it, you basically slide so right now, there's a way to get to the courtyard from the first floor of both courtyards. If you move the unit up north,
you create an opportunity for something to come down below. So we can't, that's a possibility. So yeah, and I guess to kind of summarize, we could find a second entrance, a way to make that work. We appreciate you agreeing with us about not really wanting to get public access directly to the courtyards. There's a number of concerns, security, and most specifically, but we really were trying to avoid that directly from the courtyard to the street. But second entrance into the building might be a little bit different, but I did want to also talk about, we just touch on, one of the real reasons that we put the main lobby over at this end of the building, two reasons, I should say. Knowing that, again, part of our perspective of this is to encourage the use of public transportation. I mean, that's a focal point of our developments, is that that is where the buses are, that is where the bike sharing is, that's likely where the busiest, where ride sharing is gonna come from. So from that perspective, it makes a little bit of sense. That's also where Pearl Street is for cars coming in and out, that makes sense for drop off.
How does ride sharing pull up at that site?
If they're coming from the east, they would pull up right in front of the building.
There's a lane they can park.
There's a lane they can pull out of the traffic, and if they're coming from the west, our intent is to not have a left-hand turn available from 7th Avenue into Pearl Street. So that's part of our traffic study, because that would potentially cause.
So you're saying that there's a place where you can, on westbound and 7th, you can pull off in front of what your current lobby is and stay out of traffic?
No, westbound would be a little bit different. That's eastbound, I'm sorry, westbound, yeah, if you're on the east, yes, if you're coming from the east, westbound, there's currently parking spaces there.
No, I don't think there's any parallel parking on 7th right now.
Yeah. There is.
So, because can you zoom back out on that?
You can see there's. So there is space where a car could pull off in the front and get out of traffic.
Yeah, there you go. I think this is very, very telling rendering. You know, I think you put the entrance there because it's closer to High Street. You can see it from High Street, and from a marketing standpoint, it's where I live. I get it. But I also wonder about an entrance that would be axial to the road. You know, you have the advantage that the road comes straight and then turns. You know, so when you look straight down that road, no, this is the 7th, right? When you look straight down 7th, your eye goes to the middle of the building, not necessarily.
One of the other challenges we have is that the site is sloping. So really, this corner, it yields us the greatest height and availability for that lobby space. So as you start to work to the middle of the site, it gets to be particularly challenging because you're in between levels at that point. And if you get all the way to the east side of the site, then that lower level almost disappears. So it's a physical challenge to put something in the middle of the building, so it made the most sense from a design perspective to give it a lot of height, to give it a prominence at this corner from kind of multiple reasons. So it did make sense.
It is. I think building bias problems. The lobbies on the corner that you're most likely to see. From a multifamily perspective, at the lower level, it makes sense that you get to it from the garage on the one side, street on the other. I think the more substantial rank it when raised is that's you need to. I don't know what the solution is. Someone is.
We have some thoughts.
Like I think you need to. I think this is something I reasoned last time. I think the lobby addresses the street great, but I think the entire rest of it has to do with.
The other thing I'd like to add to that, and this is getting into more detail, so I don't disagree with my colleague's assessment of, big picture stuff first and then dive into the weeds later, but it is bugging me a lot is your plan is illustrating that there may be some measure of street trees along 7th, but they're not showing it to presumably the one cover the building, which is fine. But what's there right now, what you're kind of illustrating with your materials is it's going to be a tree break situation or something, which just don't even go there. We've had the same discussion with the developer on 9th. It's like, if you're going to do something, you've got the room. I could care less about landscaping between a sidewalk and a building, especially this is like a suburban approach to it. I mean, you don't need a lot of crap between a sidewalk and a building, especially in the condition where your living spaces are elevated above the sidewalks. You're not really peeking into people's windows. What would make that a much more livable sidewalk, and for people in those units, is have as generous a tree lawn or something as you could, and put as big a trees as you can possibly afford in there. And that's going to make it a much pleasant to drive along, more pleasant to walk along. And the second thing is, I appreciate, I think this is a preliminary rendering, it's also that right now, you're sitting there looking at a lot of concrete in a parking lot. So just be mindful of where you see people. Where I would see people is near the lobby. It's like, I don't really want to go in and deal with security or whatever your protocol is. I'm going to sit out here and do email until you come out. So I would see people in appropriate places. I don't think anyone's going to sit along Seventh and stare at Kroger parking lot. So I would just be mindful of that.
Where the setbacks are and the sidewalk, couldn't deciduous trees be planted between the sidewalk and the courtyard so that they would shade the courtyard? They would
Presumably,
shade the
yeah,
building?
if those are setbacks, certainly.
And it seems like that's where they've got the most volume of space to play with instead of tight street trees located in such a way that they're not going to thrive because there's not enough land.
Well, I mean, I don't know what dimensionally you've got, but it appears like you've got 6 or 7 or 8 feet of space north of the sidewalk, which I think in this condition, I would much rather see the majority of that space in a tree lawn, because you don't need an 8-foot sidewalk, you really don't. I mean, if you had a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk, I personally think it's wide enough. The other thing I'm just curious about is if you look at the photograph along Seventh is, are you burying all these utilities? There's some serious.
Yeah,
overhead
we started
utilities.
that discussion with the city. It's very challenging. So we've got utilities on both the alley side and Seventh Avenue side. The intent, I think the current preference is that the utilities are actually buried along the alley side, unfortunately, not the Seventh Avenue side.
Okay, so those are gonna remain?
Those are likely to remain at this point, based on feedback that we've gotten from some of our preliminary site compliance reviews. So there's a number of factors. We've got a lot of underground water supply work that will need to happen. Right now, we're currently trying to determine whether it's better to do that along Seventh Avenue or along Pearl Street and the alley in the back. So that's back and forth a little bit with the utility groups as well.
Go back to the.
We would love to, you're right, we would love to get rid of the whole.
Okay, go back and forth, you're looking at it more. So, I mean, I'm not an electrical engineer, but I don't know if the bigger poles are on the south side of Seventh or more of a, it's not regional, but the stuff on the north, there's no way you could transfer. I mean, I don't know if it's 13.2 or 100,000 volts. I don't know what the stuff is. There's no way you could put it all on one side.
Trust me, we would love that. We would love nothing more. For a number of reasons.
Right in the middle. It's coming from the right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Is the tall stuff coming in?
The tall stuff's on the Kroger side, the bulk of those are on the Kroger side and Seventh Avenue, so the south side of South. We do have a couple of poles that are on our side, and again, we've started some preliminary discussions with utility groups on those. And a lot of it comes down to one utility and another. If we're going to have to rip up Seventh Avenue in order to do a lot of the water supply work, then it may make sense to also put some of the electrical underground, but they don't necessarily want it in the same place. And then,
well, they've been doing nothing but ripping it up for the last 5 years, so feel free to.
they just went out and replaced a bunch of the sidewalks last week. In a year or so to do the development, so I wish we could talk to them.
Can you tell us about your strategy for the stepping?
Yeah, let's
What's all going on
about that.
What are your objectives?
I think, listening to a lot of neighborhood comments, I mean, one of the.
Well, forget the name. What are your objectives?
My objective is to create some rhythm across the street front, to have something that's not just, a solid wall across, to allow, we talk about in the guidelines, creating some courtyard space, so creating some spaces that actually, again, if you're walking from the street, if that's an open type of railing, if those courtyards are detailed, nicely articulated, then there's advantage of walking down the sidewalk and seeing those. Trying to bring the scale down. I think we've tried to bring the scale down in the building on all 4 sides, understanding where it lives. But again, trying to create a rhythm, and there was some discussion about how do you look at townhouses, or how do you look at other building typologies on a street, and that's really kind of where we're kind of getting a lot of those ideas, inspirations from, is breaking that down and creating that rhythm across the front.
And if I could add a little bit to that, one of the things that unfortunately we are reacting to and we like to kind of call it in our office, is the uncommon effect. So everybody that we talk to when we start discussing this project, whether it's neighbors or community groups or, or groups like yourselves, inevitably people reference the uncommon building that's right around. And I think, whether you love it or not, I'm not gonna comment, but we get a lot of people saying, don't do what they did. Please don't bring us another uncommon building. So when we hear that from everybody in the neighborhood, we listen to it and we try to respond to it, and which starts the process.
Well, that's not hard.
No, it's not hard. We really hope we can do better. We really hope.
Different than the uncommon building is not hard, so that's not a design cue.
But it
Let's talk to us about that.
It leads us, I'm sorry, it leads us to the point of saying that, okay, we need to take, it is a little bit of a Jenga game, if you want, or a chess game, where there's a certain amount of volume that we need as a developer in order to make the building work from a financing perspective. I don't think there's any secret to that. And the reality is, if you do have one piece that is 7 or 8 stories tall, then you can get by with another piece of the building that can be less tall or less dense. When we start, and we presented options like that in both the Wineland Park Civic Association and the UAC committee previously, and we've gotten some pushback about certain areas are just too tall. So now we start to
understand that we are the architectural review board.
We
Okay?
do, we do.
All right, so please.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
We appreciate that you went and you met, okay? But the problem is you've made lots of design decisions based on those comments.
Yeah.
And you're coming here and fine, you're telling us, look what we did. We did this, and that's all very interesting, but understand that we're charged with reviewing the design. And I would have rather have you come to us very conceptually early on, and let's talk about concepts, broad concepts, not about, that, and then, it could then
There's a
get
if I
community
just
comment
scroll
alike.
back, if you scroll back to that, again, there's a little bit of,
See,
you look at the.
for me, I don't know if anybody else agrees, but I believe that the stepping on Seventh Avenue is silly. And I would rather you say, I'll put less bulk on the alley, or I'll put less bulk on the edges, and I'll put more bulk on Seventh. That would just be something I'd wonder about. Why not do that? I think your courtyards are effective, they break they break it up, and there's opportunity there for various treatments and landscaping and the like. But the whatever it is, cement board thing that pops up there like that, I think it's very strange. And wonder why it's like that. I wonder why you have 3 pieces of brick and one is tall and the other 2 are short. What is the reason for that?
Well, the piece at the end is really just helping accentuate the entry and the corner element. Again, the idea was to create these so that these have some individuality to them as they come down the street, and yet they're still part of the bigger picture.
Well, one thing I was wondering about, to kind of pick up on what Frank said, is this coming from a non-architect on the UNDRB, but if you drive around Wineland Park has a lot of it's a streetcar neighborhood, so there's all these predominantly 2-story, really kind of interesting brick buildings. And I asked myself the second I started looking at this, like, how much does it cost to switch up the material to this, whatever the white stuff is, and then to put the piece that comes out? Would your money be better spent doing something like a more interesting course? I mean, something that kind of speaks to the tradition of the neighborhood. And I don't disagree with this thing just bouncing up and down all over the place. Now, I'd rather have a really handsome building that addresses the predominant street, which is 7th. And whatever you want to do in the alley, I care a lot less about that than what the majority of people are going to see, which is the people from 7th and the people on, in Hyde and King. So.
Feel like the building will stick in the flag.
All right, can't hear you, Tony.
I personally don't think a building built in 20. It's the genuine flag straight out.
I don't think it has a copy of it, but I'm just saying I think there's elements of that that are a lot more interesting than just
I think one of the things that I'm hearing in various comments that I resonate with is that there's a generic quality about all of these buildings now. We just keep seeing more and more of them, that it's more like the uncommon than they make claims. And,
There's nothing special about it.
and yeah, and,
Oh, it's because it's
but,
free.
you know, and you're at a diagrammatic state, so it's not a criticism per se, because you're at a point where you're trying to make the project work. You've got numbers to do it, you've got all these other things. But I think the effort to, and I think this happened to some degree with Rhodey Design, and we were pleased to see that they made the design effort to do something. Once you look back at their portfolio of housing design, they had some really strong and beautiful buildings all over the country. And when we said, we expect something more like that, they said, oh, okay, well, let's bring out our 18.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think to Frank's point, that's also the danger of listening to the neighbors.
It's a maybe, yes. I mean,
It's sort of,
what I'm saying is
no,
that I want
it's,
them,
Katie, I know you're an
I want
advocate for
them
the
to do the
neighborhood.
best design that they can do, rather than simply doing things that are generic. And again, I'm not saying that the generic quality, they have to stay at a sort of boxy place to get the numbers to work and so on. So I'm calling for from now on to do something that expresses the design of the building. Potentially they find something that's the spirit of the neighborhood, not copying anything historical,
Well, I mean,
but
I think
working
the issue
harder
is,
to make a beautiful building.
I think
That's all
the
I'm-
issue is, you listen to the neighbors, but it's easy to get confused between legitimate questions of scale and density and stylistic designs. And I think the viewpoint of the neighbors is important in terms of overall density and scale and massing. But when they start talking about, oh, I like brick, or I like, cornices, it's like, to Frank's point, that is the realm of the architecture review. And I would agree, I think maybe, what KB's saying, the project at the is conceptual. It's sort of a mishmash of trying to make the various neighbors happy, put in the right kind of materials to just enough brick to make the traditionalists happy, just enough fiber cement to pencil out forma, and enough detail to keep it interesting, but not to break your perform. And I think you're getting what I think a lot of us are sort of lukewarm about, which is something that is a little bit of a mishmash, and it's neither here nor there. And I think KB's sort of point is a good one, which is if you can step away a little bit from some of maybe the stylistic considerations you heard, come back to us with a design that has some clarity and some ambition in the way the pieces together. I'm not completely sort of against the stepping. Like I get that the stepping sort of reflects the change in scale from the street to the residential side. But it's like, the three pieces, they're not quite different, but they're different. It's neither here. And the one piece is tall, and the other two are the same. It's like I think the whole thing needs to be revisited with some understanding of conceptual clarity.
The essence of time, now that we've been talking about this for an hour and 15 minutes, and we usually allot 15 to 20 minutes per case. Are there any final thoughts, or questions, or feedback from either side?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On behalf of the client, I would respectfully request that you action on zoning this evening. We've given an awful lot of feedback that we can integrate. And I think that makes my line fired.
No, I think that's.
I think that's
wise.
And so, best practice.
Go.
Application. And
Then we continue the application.
Second. Okay.
Motion and second to continue. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate the feedback.
Thank you for your time. Staff approved applications. Any questions on the staff approved applications? Seeing none, do we need to vote on the staff approved applications?
well, you'll just mention.
Okay. All right. Staff approved applications, UID 21-08-001, which is 316 to 318 East 20th Avenue. The second staff approved application, UID 21-08-002, 1976 North High Street. Last, new business, city attorney guidance. Want to talk about that?
This guidance was emailed to the Vice Chair. I just wanted to essentially, I'll just read this for we're advised that it's best practice to table, postpone, or continue an application, and that the motion should include the reason the application. Essentially, yeah, so to have a formal motion before to approve or deny, approve with conditions, table or continue, and include the reason. That's just, to follow the legal recommendation. So yeah, just for meetings moving forward, the board can motion to table or continue. If that happens, the board has to give a reason.
What reason was the applicant's request?
Yep.
This time, yeah, they requested
Which is
it.
best.
That's mostly goes for her.
Yeah.
But if you all start the motion, then you say because X, Y, Z, and then.
Okay. Any final comments? Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize for being late. I thought that they were all.
Don't ever let 'em